Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lorcan here from Steady. I'm one of the membership consultants here, and I'm just going to talk to you today about how memberships can work for you. So, firstly, thank you all very, very much for applying for the IMA. We had some wonderful applications from all over the world, and yeah, we'd sort of like to you understand membership a little bit more. Just some quick sort of housekeeping. Can you all see and hear me okay? If you want to just pop in a little yes into the chat function on here and we can get things started. Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, so where we'd like to begin with is talking about Steady very quickly. So, Steady can help you turn your communities into paying members. So, most content creators won't have resources to directly monetize their communities. They might rely on shaky ad revenue or donations. So, we're sort of think of Steady sort of like Shopify for creators. And in the course of, we sent you a type form there with a few questions as to things like what are memberships, how do they work, what are the benefits, is my podcast suitable for memberships, how much work is running a membership program as a podcaster, and how do I launch my own membership program as a podcaster. So this presentation should answer all those questions for you, and then we have some additional questions at the end that people have already sent in, which I'll cover. And you can send in questions on there's a questions tab on here too, which you're more than welcome to fire away with any additional questions you might have. So when we speak about memberships, we speak about privilege and purpose. So there's a few different ways of monetizing content. And I'll just run through this sort of this cross figure here with purpose and privileges, and I'll run through with you briefly the different ways that you could consider monetizing and why memberships are a great way to monetize. So here, this cohort of publishers and websites use advertising to monetize. So there's no purpose, there's no privileges. It's people pop on and view these sites, and these sites they need to fund themselves through advertisement. Our next cohort is where there's no privileges but purpose. So this is more of a donations based feature. Um, sorry, you're saying people are saying you only have a black screen. Okay. Um, so I'll just see if I can. Has this worked for you? Can you see this? Okay, super, super. Okay, so I'll just pop back there a little bit. I've just gone through a few organizations that use advertising, one way of monetizing. That's no purpose and no privileges. Our next cohort is in the donation side of things. That's where there's a strong purpose, but people aren't going to get anything in return if they decide to give any money other than perhaps a sense of fulfillment or altruism. And our next cohort is where you'll have no purpose, but just you're paying for privileges. So somewhere like The Economist or the New York Times, where your people are looking for information, and that's the sort of privilege that they're paying for. But there's no real sort of higher purpose behind purchasing this content for a lot of people. And our fourth way of monetizing that we find these days is membership, and that's where you'll have the intersection of privileges and purpose. So for you, for podcasters, it's very important to sort of to have these ongoing conversations with your audience as much as possible. And really together, it's all about dialing in your purpose. Now, podcasts, you've got a really great leg up on a lot of other media in that you're directly speaking to the audience member or your potential member. They've got you right in their ear. So there's really a lot more when people listen to podcasts, a lot of the time they're doing this for this sort of they have a purpose behind it. There's a lot of podcasts out there. It's a very niche driven segment of the media sphere, and it is as sort of but to really dial that in, we'd recommend a continual and ongoing conversation with your audience, no matter how big or how small your podcast is. The different privileges that you can offer for people who'd like to become part of your community where they'll get that valuable reward. It can be engaging with you directly and becoming part of the story that you're telling. It can be if you like to invite them to a special community, provide them with extended episodes if you want to, or in fact, or perhaps allow them to help you with finding sources, finding different more additional information you might need for research for episodes. So really, it's all about getting and your audience, reaching out to them and building that sort of passion together. So yeah, how does this work for podcasters? This is one of the questions we asked you. I've kind of touched on participation a little bit and how you can do that, but it's all about there's three P's. So purpose, so are you as a podcast, and more importantly, who are you as a podcaster for your audience? What are the privileges they might get? How can they participate in your podcast? So these are sort of some primer statements which you can use which is sort of here's what a member says, and then here's what your purpose might be. So if a member says, I love the mission of the podcast, you'd say to yourself, what's the soul of your podcast? With members, and if it's going to work for you or not. It's really important to have that purpose dialed in. Really, really, really important. This is what people are going to really latch onto and really, really get involved in and with. Um, and sort of the next thing would be what privileges they could have, exclusive content, community features, real life experiences. If this is the amount of privileges you offer people is for if you're a smaller podcast, if it's just you working by yourself, you don't need to get too bogged down in offering the full gamut of privileges. Just one or two is all you need. Something as simple as community access is really manageable. You just need to say, you can just even say to your audience, I check this once a week. I collect all the information you've said to me once a week, and you define how much time you want to spend on your membership program. It doesn't need to take over, it doesn't need to take sort of preference what you do best, which is producing and releasing episodes. Will member this, so I'll just run through very quickly as well some podcasters that use Steady at the moment, just to give you an idea of the sort of range of podcasters. And again, this sort of speaks to, are they going to work for you? So the first podcast here is Ak Pap or Lapap. They're a feminist LGBTQ podcast, and they offer readers, or they offer listeners, excuse me, just some additional exclusive episodes. They've got around 5,000 or so, 5,000 or so people on their Instagram. For them, it's just something they do on the side. It's a nice little bit of extra money that they get every month, simply for asking their members. Our next example is here is Swanson Ehrlich. They're a podcast about gay sex. Again, not an audience of about 6,000 on Instagram or so. 137 members. They earn about 670 a month at the moment. They offer community access, I believe, and also some extended episodes. Vulcan Damarong is a current affairs and politics podcast. They earn 3,800 a month, and their podcast model is again extended episodes for people, community access. They have just a plan where they ask people to support them. It doesn't have to, you don't really have to get into privileges too much. As I said, it can just be about your purpose. So if you join the membership program, you help me continue to produce episodes that benefit you in some you the listener in some way. And our final example here is the pod. This is one of the larger podcasts on Steady. They've got 2,900 members. You need to sign up in order to access the full range of content with them. They have really dialed in their purpose and their niche. They're a gaming podcast. And there's not very many other podcasts out there like them. So this is why membership really, really works for the pod. Just another quick thing to remember for getting people to join your membership program, you need to ask your listeners. So ask them 5 times, twice in each episode, at the beginning and the end of the episode, and use your social media. Your beginning segment could be a bit longer and really introduce why you should support you through memberships, and then your final reminder in an episode can just be a 1 or 2 lines. It doesn't need, you don't need to re-explain yourself twice in an episode. About 5% of your engaged listeners to pay about €5 per month. This can depend a little bit country to country as to, yeah, if people want to pay more or less, but in and around €5 is a general rule of thumb. I can hear some questions are coming in there, or just yeah, Stephanie, I'll get to that there in the next couple of minutes. So yeah, the questions were, so first of all, there's a few people have already sent in questions about, or yeah, they've already sent in questions which I can answer. I can just see the question from Stephanie there, which says her audience is about half in the US and half spread around the world. And how important is it to set the currency right? It's more important, whatever is easiest for you. If you're based in the US, use US dollars. If people know that you're based in the US, it makes sense for them too, that they would pay you in US dollars. So the first additional questions I've received, I'll just run through now. So we have one. Is it okay to have memberships along with sponsors and advertising, or do most people pick one of these only? Yes, it's okay to have memberships alongside sponsors and advertising. If you look back at this five the rule of five, only 5% of your engaged audience is likely to pay. This can go up or down. It's not fixed. That's the best estimate. So if you're doing this full time, if you can get a sponsor that fits with what you're doing, that fits, same with your advertising, then absolutely, it's okay. Just remember, of course, that the kind of sponsors and advertise, if you're running a membership program, it would be odd if you had sponsors or advertising that would clash with the shared values you have with your community, but that's unlikely to happen. Um, the next question that we had was, will I lose money? No, you won't lose money. If you're with starting a membership program, it's important to have that engaged community to speak to your members on an ongoing basis. With a membership program, you will only if you're using a service like Steady, for example, you pay on a commission basis for membership. Um, so it's as soon as you start earning money that some money is taken away with you from you as a service and commission charge. But other than that, no. Um, just a couple more questions there. Is there a minimum amount of listeners you'd need to be eligible? The podcasts that I showed you at the beginning, Swanson Ehrlich, for example, list your for your listenership, probably around 1,000 people per month, is a good amount to think about starting with. It doesn't. You can start with membership programs when your audiences are smaller. However, it can become an afterthought for people if you if you don't speak about it correctly, and it's difficult to have for it to make sense for people to sign up unless there's a little bit of critical mass. So if you have if you just start your podcast and you don't launch it as something where you need people's help, you just start your podcast and then at some point add membership, but without really explaining it and without really communicating why you need to have membership in place and what people could benefit by it, it likely won't work. um, the more listeners you have, the better. Just think again about that 5 by 5 5 5 rule. Um, yeah, no, there's no real hard and fast answer. It's just sort of the more you have, the better it's going to be. If you're starting out with membership and your audience is still small, make it like you could kickstart, for example, or crowdfund. You can use Steady to do that, for example, or there's of course, a Kickstarter, other different services. Then you make it clear to people why they should sign up and why they should support you on an ongoing basis, even if you're new. um but if you start new and then start saying, can you support me, and you don't have that big of an audience, these things can just fall totally by the wayside, and people don't pay attention to the fact that you have a membership program at all available for them to support you through at all. Another one of the questions from the type form we had was how to promote a membership and how to configure a paid feed. We have a few different guides as to how to do that. The configuring a paid feed can be done directly through Steady. It's a private RSS feed that is generated for each member. They would need to log in to their Steady account to access that. And once they've accessed that, any premium episodes that you add to that feed will automatically be added to their pod catcher. Promoting membership, when you're launching a membership program, make sure you really launch it and push it hard and let people know on all of your social channels. So for a lot of podcasters, Instagram seems to work well. For written word publications, newsletters work really well, and we'd urge you to always consider building your newsletter alongside, as you grow your audience. It's our sort of best measure currently, or one of the best measures for determining how successful you might be in a membership program, because you're not going to your message is, if it's going to get lost, it'll get lost in someone's inbox versus a news feed, and the inbox is a lot smaller than a news feed. And especially if you regularly send people an email and notice things coming through, and they'll sort of, yeah, they'll recognize you. So promotion is sort of, it's all about that's on the sort of online side of things. Offline, word of mouth. If you're speaking, if you can get yourself a guest on your show that's bigger than the show itself and leverage their audience. Um, a few different podcasters I've spoken to have done this, but then they haven't got the response they've wanted. From a growth in audience, the solution there for them has been to ask the guests again, look, can you do a check-in in a month? Set yourself a reminder to check in with your guest you've had on and say, can you share again that we were on the episode together? Also use your listeners that you have at the moment. If you have that newsletter running, for example, you can say, hey, would you mind sharing the podcast with somebody who you also think would like the podcast? Um, and sort of turn your listeners into ambassadors for your podcast. Really, and keep this up, keep this sort of telling people on both the podcast or through other channels. Please, if you like the podcast, send it to somebody else for them to listen to. And sort of, yeah. So we have another question here, which is, I'm struggling with promoting the podcast myself. Everything has been through word of mouth, and that's been great. But I'm currently on Reddit feeling spammy and self-indulgent. Um, yeah, the sort of self-indulgent aspect of things is kind of something that, in some regard, that we come across where podcasters, in particular, sort of feel like some people feel like they don't deserve for their podcast to be out in the world, or they don't, they shouldn't tell people too much about it because it's a little bit too much or something. But like, not at all. I mean, there's a whole community out there of people on Reddit, for example. There's the Reddit podcasts. You can just share on there a whole lot. Use those. Try and get guests, as I mentioned. If you ask people to review the podcast, if you have listeners at the moment, ask them to review the podcast. And so that'll help you on, say, like Apple Podcasts. um, use your social channels to push it. If you can use, say, like LinkedIn is an effective tool for a lot of times. Also, you can even just do directly out, talk to people directly. But yeah, so I mean, Reddit's a fine place to go. Just, I don't, you have to sort of kind of keep at it, and it can be, of course, a bit frustrating, but absolutely just don't worry about feeling self-indulgent. The We've another question: is there a business plan for podcasters? Yes and no. It's going to depend on what kind of podcast you want to run. Um, there is not a hard and fast business plan for podcasters. There is a sort of general way that people move into monetization, and it'll be using a mixture of advertising, sponsors, and memberships generally. Um, you can choose which route you want to take. So you can make your podcast more attractive to advertisers by having a sort of clean and clear niche. So advertisers will generally are sort of like podcasters are on more of an even keel. I mean, not something that's not going to affect their brand negatively, for example. So you could, if you could actively reach out to different advertisers and say, here's what my podcast is like, I think it'll fit with you. For membership, we'll send you just some different guides to membership as well, which you could use to look at to see if that could be one of your business plan or one of your methods of monetization. for sponsorship, it's in a similar vein to advertising. Does your podcast fit what the sponsor advertiser is looking for? And then you've got the event space as well. If you sort of develop a little bit more of an audience, this is another one of the methods of monetization that people use. Yeah, I can, Kirk. We can share the why. Yes, I can share this with you, or I can pull this up now. There's a question. Just can you share the slide again about why to be a member? Um, and does the purpose statement need to have a list of expenses that needs to be covered? No, you don't have to be. I mean, you can be if you want to, but you don't have to be. You don't have to itemize um how much money you'd need. You can just say how much you'd need. So I'll just pop back there to our sort of purposes slide. So this is what we find. So these are from surveying that we've done with different podcast members. And you have, yeah, why people become members, and then what's the sort of purpose there. So business plan for podcasters, really, it's just a matter of figuring out how you want to eventually monetize. If you want to monetize, if you don't want to monetize, then just keep producing episodes and keep having fun. How can we build an audience for our podcast is another question. I mean, things like write up your show notes so you get noticed more, use the social channels, use your newsletter, get guests on the show, and keep at it. And eventually, your audience will grow and grow over time. And we had another question, the final question that we received in advance was just about what do memberships entail? And I think we might have covered a lot of that already. Um, yeah, there's a sort of point here from Rachel. Anyone else's podcast names to give them a listen. That's a really nice idea if you want to throw in your podcast names on here. And we can all have a listen at some point to your podcasts. Are there any more questions about like are there any sort of any challenges that people are facing at the moment that we can help you with? Or is there does anyone have any just questions, I suppose? So yeah, with the why people become members, this sort of feeling of affiliation or belonging is quite a large portion of um, why people purchase memberships. Stephanie asked us, how long does it take from first asking to getting some members? If you know, start with people you know. Um, so we've a membership potentials worksheet, which is will be shared with you after the webinar, as part of the resource list that we have. And one of the things is asked you to fill in is how many people could you ask to support you immediately. So that's the if you know of people who already would like to start supporting the podcast, then they straight away, no problem. If it's new people, then yes, it does take some time to get people to become members. You'll have a load of you'll have people who want to become members. You sign up very quickly. Then you have got people you've got people who take a longer time. You need to just once you sort of commit to membership, you need to commit to mentioning it, in a few different places. So on the podcast, on social channels, newsletter, it becomes like second nature to do this. It's just like it's just about including a link or saying it. It becomes it becomes just part of your usual introduction on a podcast, your usual closing. And hopefully you'd want your membership program to last for a long time. So the longer you go and the longer you mention it, the more people will sign up. It's a commitment to having, yes, it's there you go. It's definitely said it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Um, Rachel asks, what's the percentage that gets paid to SETI out of the money that you make? 10%. And you've all shared your podcasts on here, which is nice. Um, yeah, I'll just sort of flick through the rest of those slides that I have here. And yeah, so we've got these resources which we'll send around to you, interviews and this membership potentials worksheet, how to make the most of Steady as a podcaster, how you can offer exclusive episodes with the RSS feed, and as well our Steady community chat. And yeah, that's sort of our big slogan is good work deserves more than a like, which it really does, because all of you are putting time and effort into creating um, these wonderful podcasts. So it's very, very important that you sort of take on board that your podcast is worth something to your audience, and that's why they keep coming back to listen to you. Are there any more questions? Yeah, just Rachel has said here it's weird to ask for money, but yeah, the amount of work you put is sort of you have to do how you are spending a lot of time on doing this, and that is one potential appeal to your audience is just to tell them how much time it takes you to produce episodes, and that it would be if they enjoy it, it's simple. They can just pay you the price of a coffee, or like they can how much is €4 or €5 or dollars for somebody a month. It's not very, it's depends of course on the person, but for some people that's not a lot of money at all. It's just about saying like, look, I'm here doing this for you, can you do this for me? Are there just any last questions before, and if not, I'll start wrapping this up, and we'll send you out some further information as to how you can move forward with membership if you need some different resources for you as well. Um, no, okay, I think I'll just wrap this up here. So, if that's okay with everyone, thank you all ever so much for agreeing to take, or so for taking part. And yeah, we'll have an email out to you with some further information. If you ever want to contact me, you have my email address, just lorcan@steadyhq.com. Um, if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I'm under the name Lorcan Fidgeon, which is my given name. And yeah, more than happy to connect. And if you want to have a little chat or whatever, we can do so. But I'll end this here now. Thank you all ever so much for taking the time, and have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.